Welcome back, everybody. We have another episode of the Fraud Boxer podcast coming at you today. Today, I am joined by Patrick Chen from Spec. I am really excited about this one because this is an episode that I think has some technology on the forefront of what we're doing. And I think a lot of us will have questions about what it is and how it works because it is the low code, no code thing. And we see that everywhere. We see people talking about it. But what does that really mean? Today, we're going to peel apart the layers of that onion. So how are you doing today, Patrick?
I'm doing well, Jordan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I really am loving the fact that we have a whole nother pro audio setup here. These ones sound so good when we have like microphones and headphones involved in the recording. It sounds like we're actually in a studio together, despite doing this over Zoom. So I am super happy for that. So I just want you to know I love to see it.
All right. Glad we can make it happen.
So we've known each other for a little while, quite a few years now. I think I met you way back in the day when I was at Fandango, and I believe you were at Threat Metrics. And you guys used to always have the Silverado event. Well, a couple of times you did it, and you did one up in, if I'm not mistaken, you did one in Tahoe, and then we did one in Palm Springs area, and those were really, really, really great events for just your guys as users there. So I've known you from those. And then I also I believe that my old roommate Eamon Murphy, you used to work with as well over there.
Yeah, he was my cube mate, so he sat right behind me with the original fraud Jedi himself.
That's the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend. Yeah, I met him years and years and years even before that, I believe, when he was at the gift card company. And that he made the transition over to you guys, and I went up to the Bay Area to go work for Gift, and I moved in. He was very kind to open his doors for me to move in until I got settled, and we had a Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events that wound up with us having to move real quick, and then we ended up becoming long-term roommates my whole time when I was up there in the Bay Area, just not too far from the Threat Metrics offices right there in downtown San Jose.
Right.
So like I said, I've known you for a while there. I always like to ask people that I have on this, like how they got into fraud, because it's always an interesting thing, because none of us like started out with plans to be in fraud. We all just kind of wound up in fraud. So how did you get into fraud?
Right. It's like there's no like major for fraud, right? Nor does anybody really know what fraud is unless you're in the industry. But I think like a lot of folks I got in from customer like support, tech support, got access to like a database to run SQL queries on, like learn that on the fly. And then I think, once you get access to data and you can start to look at and identify weird things, you just kind of start to gravitate towards like fraud, risk, etc.
It's one of those things that like, if you start to see a pattern, it's what you do with it kind of determines your future, like, do you tell somebody else or do you start to take the actions yourself?
Yeah.
And then I think those people that start to take the actions themselves, they're like us. They wind up like us. And, but not everybody that starts out that way winds up as the co-founder of the company. So I think you've made quite a name for yourself. But you spent some time at some other places before. Let's talk about those a little bit, just so we can get a little more in your background here.
Yeah, from a tech perspective, been in kind of payments a little bit, but been at CashEdge, which was a payment startup that was acquired by Fiserv. Went to Threat Metrics after that, which was acquired by Lexus. Then went to, quote unquote, the merchant sides with eBay, and then also with Payrix, which is a payment facilitator startup that also got acquired.
So you got bought drinks for a little while instead of having to buy the drinks. So that must have been a nice little change of pace there,
Yeah, it's like, of course, like all startups get acquired or something, right? Like, is that just the natural progression?
I think that those two CashEdge and the Threat Metrics acquisitions, like, were pretty big ones. Fiserv is a big name. They gobbled up everything, and obviously LexisNexis is doing their version of that and gobbling up everything. I think that LexisNexis acquisition of Threat Metrics was like our first big one that happened in our industry. Like, there's been some pretty large ones since then with like Ekata and Emailage, but like that Threat Metrics one was like the first of like the big huge acquisitions there.
Right.
And yeah, I know you guys had spent a really long time on that product over there, making it what it was, and I still use it to this day. I got away from it for a little while, but then I came back to it there, and like what it's become now, it's its own monster, and I was spending some time over probably a while ago, a little bit over a year ago, working with some of your product team there from a merchant's perspective, trying to tell them like what what we as merchants are looking for from the product so they could kind of enhance the offering that they have, because it's so comprehensive right now, like it can be a little overwhelming. So I was trying to help them like find a way for us to peel back the layers and make it a little less daunting when somebody looks at it. But I think you left shortly after the acquisition and went to eBay, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. Yeah. And like, what you hit on is like, like the evolution from like a device and, IP reputation company into kind of that full-fledged digital identity capability. So it was fun to be a part of.
Yeah, that had to be really cool to see it to morph that much, because it is very much a enterprise comprehensive solution now. So you spent your time at these places here. You got a couple of cash outs, bro down, as they say on South Park. But then you did the merchant side. But then you decided to found a company. So let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about that process, how that idea happened. I know Nate's done some other podcasts here, so I mean the story's probably been shared a little bit before, but this is my podcast, and I would like to hear the story for myself.
All right. I mean, like it really came from, I think the idea for Spec really manifested because Nate and I ran client engagement at Threat, right? Working pre-sales and implementations and, working with customers after they go live. And we just really saw merchants struggle like to, really operationalize threat metrics. We then went to eBay. eBay had this huge swing, right? Like, like getting off of PayPal onto Adyen, bringing all of the payout like risk in-house. Like it was, like a really awesome, initiative to be a part of. But we saw the same problem there where it's just like, how can it be so hard to hook up an API?
Yeah.
Like what are we missing? Right. And that's really where the idea for Spec came from. It's just like, let's solve a different problem. There's all these great solutions out there. There's a lot of great vendors out there for everything from KYC to payments to, everything in between, authentication, like SMS verification and all of that. We didn't feel like, starting like the 395th like API provider was really the thing. We wanted to solve the problem, I think, that plagues a lot of companies, which is like all of that engineering effort needed to,
Mm-hmm.
Develop and operationalize your solutions.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Like I myself have been through a ton of implementations, and depending on the size of the company and the resources that you have behind you, some of those can be shorter, some of those could be longer. And I will say most of the time they wind up on the longer side. So like 12 to 18 months, and that's a long time. And it gets to be like into this mode of like you're implementing for so long, when the day actually comes that you cut over, it doesn't even seem real, because it just seems like your whole life is just another day, another working on this implementation and trying to figure out and iron out the kinks before that go live. And when that go live actually happens, usually it's a little less ceremonious than I think most people would realize, because you're just so tired. And
Yeah.
I think that, especially for me in the past, you have to look at, like, there's a lot of salespeople that come at you with these new shiny products, and they may sound great and they may be great, but the problem is usually you're in a long-term deal with your current provider, and to get the buyout or the buy-in to switch out that product to something else might be non-existent. So you could really love it and they could have everything that you want to have, but you might not even be able to get it because the juice, it just isn't worth the squeeze to rip out what you have and start over again. And I think that, like with you guys, specifically, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, it makes it a little different about that. So let's talk about Spec and what it specifically is. And I believe you have a product called Trust Cloud, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we call it a Trust Cloud. So it's a no-code customer journey orchestration platform. It takes data from any customer interaction, and you can utilize workflows to call out to any third party or internal APIs. And then most importantly, take action anywhere in that customer experience. So you're not dependent on, that one checkpoint, like, that,
Yeah.
some engineering personnel put in like 3 years ago, right? And that's the only place you have to enforce your actions.
So that's a great point there. Like I think especially for us legacy fraud folks that have been in the industry for a really long time, is we always started with our fraud check was at when you click the checkout button. Like that's when we did the checkout or the fraud check. And then we started having ATOs and logins. So we tried to put fraud tools on login, some of us did. And then we had all sorts of like gift card checking, balance checking. So we try to put a fraud tool there. And then now we have people trying to change emails. So we want to put a fraud check there. But all of these places to add these fraud checks, like we have to do an implementation there. We have to put an API call in. We have to tweak it. We have to set a policy for that. We have to test it, and then we have to deploy it, and that could take, again, another 12 to 18 months just to get that one spot done. And I think with you guys, it's an interesting thing. So there's two parts in there that you said that is super interesting. So the where a customer can take any of their data interactions at all and workflow to any API. So I'm assuming, to me, that means like essentially I integrate to you, and then it's your guys' job to integrate to the partner. So kind of like what we would think in payments as like a gateway. So you're my gateway to all of these other partners. Is that the correct way to put it?
Yeah, like I think a fraud and trust gateway is exactly how we would describe it internally. In fact, we've described it internally. I think some companies we've worked with called it a fraud or a trust gateway in the past.
Okay.
But yeah, that's absolutely on point.
And I think the other part of that is we have, like, when the quote unquote integration, because this low code, no code thing is, we'll talk about that in a little bit too, is when you do it, you get all the touch points, including future touch points that haven't even been built yet, right?
Right, exactly. So the way we work is we sit in the network. So we're agnostic to any backend experience changes, right? So, with the merchants you've been at, that it's not just the fraud attack like vectors that change, like your site's changing, your good customers.
And sometimes they forget about me.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, we changed this thing. It's like, oh, we broke threat metrics. My bad. Like, we'll
I think,
get to it in
like,
3 months.
exactly. And like the whole world of like distributed commerce, like with like having Facebook stores and all of those, like a lot of times the fraud people get forgot on that, like they're so excited to get this new channel live that sometimes they forget to talk to me, and I have I raise hell in all of my companies all the time when they do this. And I make sure that, like, I must be a checklet, like a checkbox on the go live list. Like, on if you have to print out a piece of paper that everybody has to check, all their teams, marketing, everybody has to have buy-in. I need to be one of those boxes too before you go live, because so many times I've all of a sudden just started getting ripped on a fraud channel. I'm like, what is this? Why has nobody ever told me about this? I didn't even know it existed.
Digital good, like all digital gift cards, no big deal, right? Like,
Yeah,
just
it's
roll
like
it
there's
out.
no risk there, not at all. But I think that's a really compelling thing, if there's a way to, like I said, I'm going to say it again, quote unquote, integrate to one place and get all of the things, and then rely on you guys to form the partnerships, whether I need them yet or I don't, is an interesting thing. So I'm gonna ask that, even though it's kind of a loaded question, but why does it exist? Like you kind of touched on, like you guys had this problem, but can you dive a little deeper into why this exists, like why you guys exist?
Yeah, so we think we exist certainly because of this problem, I think, with borrowed engineering resources. And I would say even in, like businesses that I've been at, that where we've been lucky enough to have dedicated engineering resources, there's only so much that these engineers can do. And there's just so much like high level work that they need to do to make sure that, the businesses are acquiring top line revenue. So it really makes it hard to respond to these fraud threats, right? It's really, what you just described as kind of being pushed to the back burner, where it's just like, if like, the scenario ever exists where everything was done, like then they'll go and do your thing, right? But there's always the next product experience that they need to build out, and so on and so forth. So what our enterprise customers are seeing is exactly that, like borrowed engineering resources. And with Spec, they're empowered to outpace bad actors, but also to enable their engineers to go work on the revenue generating things, to roll out like gift cards or new product lines, to tackle new geographies that have maybe different compliance requirements.
So I am going to admit to my audience, I have cheated a little bit, and I have seen a demo of this on working on my own website, and it's pretty cool. Like it's really interesting. So what are some of the things that you guys are doing to change the world? And then we're going to dive into the specifics of what it is, like what low code, no code means. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at Spec, we're using, to use some marketing and cheesy terms, like, we're building like unity and trust and innovation in the world, right? So we're breaking down silos. So, at large organizations, like the data could live amongst like different engineering teams, like authentication data, registration data, PCI data spread all across. Moreover, like like solutions providers like are in competition with each other for the same resources, right? So you'll have KYC providers trying to get
Yeah.
into like device and digital identity and so on and so forth. Where like I think if we could give a environment where all of these vendors could do like what they do best and ensure that they get fully integrated, like the win is for all of these great merchants, and the people that'll lose will be the fraudsters and attackers.
It's really interesting, the team silos and like the different solution providers. Like I've had lately a lot of non-fraud industry people approaching me with fraud tools. Like it's like a lot like marketing experience folks, and customer experience folks, like teams, like companies like that are outside of our industry that exist solely to track how like customer experience journeys happen, but they have fraud tools, they say. So they're trying to get in, like slide into my DMs to talk to me about their tools. But it's interesting. I actually I've talked to a couple just to see what they're up to, and their approach is, and I think it's good to look at these sorts of things, to see, because we're used to our approach. Like we've been in this industry for over a decade. We're used to this type of approach, and it's interesting to see how other people that are from the outside are tackling it with their software and morphing their software. And I think that there definitely is usefulness in some of those softwares, but they're not something that could be used for a primary thing.
Right.
So here is the meat and bones of why I wanted to have you on here, because I saw it. It's cool. I saw a demo live on my actual site too, without me ever doing anything. You guys just fired up a demo and showed me exactly how it works. You showed me in a third-party fraud tool all of my stuff. So you showed me that third-party tool working. What is no code and what is low code? Because everybody has these buzzwords. It's like AI. It's like machine learning was to us 3 or 4 years ago. Now everybody's got some no code, low code. I even saw a whole webinar earlier about it today on LinkedIn. So I would love it if you could just explain it like we're five. What is no code and what is low code?
All right. I'll be happy to take a shot at it. And I think, I'll cover it in general and what I think it means for our industry.
Perfect.
So in general, like a low code platform or no code platform is just something that accelerates software development, right? So oftentimes there'll be some UI component where business leaders like you can go in and drag and drop certain workflows, things that normally had to be written by engineers in code, right? Makes, like there's a platform that makes it easy for non-engineers to be able to utilize them to do some of the things that you would naturally have engineers do. Additionally, for engineers, like a lot of no code or low code platforms offload some of like that tedious stuff that they have to do over and over again, getting access to data and all of that good stuff. So these platforms are really designed for often designed for engineering teams to support business teams, which is natural for fraud, trust, and safety and payments.
So I think that for me, like when I was originally talking to you guys just about some of my own business before, this was way before the podcast stuff. This is actual business stuff. We, in my head, I had this picture of, yeah, it's no code, low code, but after I code to you. So there had to be some initial API call built to you. And that was where like I always thought it was just another buzzword, just another thing you use. Like it's no code, low code after the work's done, which would put us kind of in the gateway realm, because then I would have to code to you, map my XML or JSON to exactly like name goes here, first name, last name, email goes here. But after all that work's done, then then I could just click it out, because then you guys are doing that mapping on the back end for yourselves. But how you guys actually do it is, I was completely wrong. And I don't like to admit that I'm wrong very often, but I was wrong here. I was wrong.
No, I mean, I think it's a natural way to think about things, right? Because in our industry today, like there's a lot of purported no code solutions, but as you described it, I think it's no code after you have a bunch of engineers code up the integration.
Yes.
So you're just like, okay, so where's the no code part? Oh, it's after you do all the code. And it's like, you got to do the maintenance on it, right? So you have to have engineers do the maintenance on it. Like as customer experience changes, if you go to like a 2.0 for your customer experience, you got to recode to that, right? So, to us, like we understand why the industry has like kind of moved in that direction, but we consider ourselves a slightly different beast, right? There literally is not any application engineering work needed to be done to connect to our platform.
So how do you do it? Tell me the secret.
All right. So I think what you saw is like we do it through a network configuration change. So like our customers go live in like a 5-minute configuration. There's a little bit of planning that goes into it to understand, kind of the network routes. There's a lot of like sitting around in awkward silence, like watching network traffic flow through and making sure it's hitting all the new checkpoints. But that's all it takes to put our platform in work or in use. As you saw, we actually piped like our sales engineer Anthony's laptop through our platform, pointed it at your site, and then we're able to make configurations on it. So like things like third-party workflows, calling out to third parties, implementing, solutions providers was all done without engineering, without us even have met your engineering teams.
Yeah, that was super cool, by the way. So it's my understanding that you guys then load what you need using my DevOps team at the content delivery network, so the CDN level. So Cloudflare, Akamai, Fastly, whatever. We all use one. Everybody uses one, whether you realize it or not. Like your website uses one. Everybody. So you put it there, which usually, like, we have certain things that like those companies provide to us too. As far as like bot mitigation and those sorts of things. But that means that all the traffic that ever hits your web servers flows through a CDN at some point. So that's where we're sticking it, and that's how you're getting the data. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I explaining it wrong?
Yeah, you're capturing most of it. And for the CDN, like most enterprises have a CDN to your point. We can also do it via DNS, which is how the network, like how when
Oh,
I go into the browser and load
yeah.
www.mysite.com, like, my browser finds your site. So like we can do it that way as well. So that's still a DevOps led action that takes a couple of minutes.
Interesting. Yeah, I was having a lot of DNS issues when I was trying to point Fraud Boxer back to the new podcast host there. It was breaking my email because I had the my DNS that I had on my web host at the time was that they were handling the redirect, and I had forgotten that I did that like a decade ago. So that was real fun. But I fixed it. We're back in business now. You
Nice.
know. Um, yeah. Keep going on. Tell me more. Just tell me more. Tell me all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So sitting in line gives us access to all the information that is needed for a workflow or, calling to a third party, or even just understand what the heck is the consumer doing in on my site. Are they abusing other, customers? Are they literally trying to extract money from me? Are they a good customer and maybe just forgot their password? Like sitting in the network flow, we see all of that data, right? So we can grab the data. Your engineers don't need to go into multiple databases to grab all this data. They can, utilize our platform and grab it directly from the network stream. Our workflow capabilities let you build logic and policies, as the industry calls them, for what you want to do, like when customers perform certain actions. And then most importantly, we can take action anywhere in that customer journey. So we can redirect to a higher authentication workflow. We can remove friction. We can stop payments from going through if that's what you want to do. All of that's accessible in that network traffic, without like, again, having to like work with engineers and having them develop on the application itself.
So, I mean, granted this, I'm going to have to ask you to play devil's advocate. That sounds kind of scary. So, is there any downsides to doing it this way besides like you could blow up my whole thing without like like let's say I didn't pay you, and then you could
Yeah.
just essentially you could stop all my traffic, right? But I mean
Right.
that's not what I'm really looking for. But are there any besides sabotage? Are there any real downsides to doing it this way? Is there any latency issues? Do you miss anything? Do you lose out on anything doing it this way? Like any of the device stuff? Is there any downside at all?
Yeah. So what you just described, like customers have full control over it, so they can route to us or around us, right? So our customers do maintain full control. So even like, we wouldn't be able to turn it off on just our side without our customers being able to
Oh,
just reroute, right? So it's
so
like,
there is fail safes in there.
yeah, like routing on takes a few minutes, so like routing off takes also a few minutes, right? So that's not a concern that like our customers have. What we're able to do from a latency perspective, like that's where like a lot of our engineering horsepower goes. So it's like sub-millisecond latency to open up an HTTPS packet, see where it needs to go, and send it along its way, right?
Interesting. And
So
then, so on the other side of that, like, so after when the data's flowing through to you, going real quick latency to you, then you have providers, solution providers that you have partnerships with on your side. Can you name a few of those partners?
Yeah, so we work very closely with Sift. We love our friends at Sift. We work closely with Socure as well.
Oh.
And then from there on, there's tons of providers that we're working with too. Largely, we're agnostic to the providers, and merchants will bring their own providers and bring their own API keys, and we'll plug it in and get it live.
So I could have my own existing relationship with a company like Sift if I wanted to, and then pass through you guys in order to make the actual integration happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get Sift's JavaScript hooked up everywhere. All of the API calls that you want, all of the follow-on calls to like update things, like if your team flags things as suspicious in a manual review, hitting payment gateways, getting early chargeback data, to identifying patterns and going back and updating those previous sessions that, hey, like we didn't know this was bad, but these are all bad now. So Sift can train their models. Like all of that becomes code free and super easy on Spec.
Very interesting. I mean, I just have so many questions. I think I'd have to probably just spend more time in there. But that's cool, the update thing, because I think that, a lot of the modern tools require that feedback loop. So if I could build that without having to build that, that would be super helpful because I always have to build that and it sucks.
Yeah. Or like manually upload it in a batch, like, once a
Yeah.
month, right? So
Yeah. Then it's too late. Then it breaks. And then by the time the other guys on the other end get it done, it's too late. Yeah. A lot in there. Um, Wow, that's super interesting. And you guys are continually onboarding like new partners on that side too, right?
yeah, we don't use our engineers to connect to it. Like we've built a platform that is agnostic to any like API endpoint we have access to. So our team, Anthony, who you met on our call, he makes those connections. His team makes those connections. It takes, for the first time, maybe like as little as a day to up to a week, depending on the complexity. And then they're just kind of drag and drop from there on.
So another thing, like and we talked about the fraud piece of this, for so long, and that's essentially what most people end up talking about on here. But what about abuse? Like, what do you have you guys tried to solve for anything there and that, like platform abuse, rewards abuse, all those things that we're all talking about, and I'm always talking about everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting kind of parallel to like the checkpoints, right? It's like, it used to be like all fraud was payments fraud, right? And it was only chargebacks. And now it's just like there's like ATO abuse, like endpoint abuse, where people can, gain like coupons or other things from various endpoints. And like all of that goes into the bucket of abuse. So we absolutely are tackling all of that. There's interesting spots where like attackers hide, right? Where, they can suppress the loading of JavaScript. They can even bypass the HTML page, but they really can't hide that network traffic. They have to surface and connect to your, backend APIs in some ways. We tackle those as well. So there's literally nowhere for a fraudster to hide since we work on DNS and the CDN. They have no choice but to go through us. And we're able to extract kind of that behavioral data, identify the endpoints that they're hitting, and surface that to our customers so they can build policies and workflows to address it.
So can you do full blown like bot mitigation stuff with your partners too? Like, like perimeter X and human style stuff? Like in theory, you could be able to do even that much too, right? Like you could get even those through that.
In theory, we can. Like we're unique in that we stitch together all the individual HTTPS sessions, and we're looking at the behavior across all those sessions. Like we're not, though we open up like HTTPS packets to see that data to see where we need to route it and what data is in there. That's not really our strong suit.
Got it.
So we do, our customers like install us with other bot mitigations tools, just like, like you can squint and say like a workflow can do some of the things that Sift can do, but like we're not out to replace Sift, and our customers utilize this in conjunction with Sift.
Yeah, I think that it's important to mention now that like you guys aren't a fraud prevention platform. You're a means to get to a fraud prevention platform.
Right.
And like you're the middle. You're the middle guy,
Yeah. We're tackling the problem that like we've not seen any, many other companies tackle, I would say, right? Which is that engineering lift, right? To offload from your engineers that are out building, like better customer experiences, out delivering things that'll generate value while kind of like leaving you high and dry sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But we're giving you guys the ability to accelerate what you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a lot of things. Like marketing oftentimes has some grandiose ideas, and I don't get to be in the room when they're whiteboarding those out, and then they launch this like we'll give you $50 if you fire up a new account. And then I'm like, hey, they're just going to make 1,000 new accounts. And then, oh, by the way, you can transfer your rewards to one single account. Like these things are happening. And if I had something that was, it didn't matter, and I could get in the way of that on velocity somewhere, that would be super useful. So I could see this, like, once people get comfortable with it, really, really being like the future of how we approach our fraud prevention stuff, especially with the speed that you can deploy it. Because I just want to come back to that. Like, it really sucks to replace your fraud tool and put a new one in. It really, really, really sucks. And it takes so long and it's so frustrating and you get so burned out doing it. And like I said earlier, it's just by the time the day comes around, you just don't care anymore. And that's just something that I just can't really ever stress enough. So what are some of the other issues that merchants are that they're facing that, like, you think like needs to be solved and that you might be able to help with specifically?
Yeah, and I'd be like eager to get your feedback here, but speed and flexibility is what we hear the most, right? And it's like, I think, like a lot of our industry talks about like, oh, like here's the signal to solve ATO, or here's the signal to solve synthetic identities, or here's the signal to solve like car testing, right? But like, I think what's missing is that, like, speed and flexibility. Like you said, like, ripping out and changing a fraud vendor is like incredibly difficult, but adding on another one is incredibly difficult in a different way, right? You're just like adding like another layer across like that entire customer experience.
So that's actually a good question I have before we move on. In that piece there is, what if I wanted to have multiple things? Do I get to like daisy chain multiple fraud providers? Do I get to like pick the order that they're called in, all of that?
Yeah, you have full control over all of that. If you want to A/B test multiple fraud vendors, you can do so. I think that's where
That make POCs a lot easier.
yeah, it makes POCs a lot easier for sure. Right.
It's
So it's
really
like
interesting.
every solutions provider gets live traffic, so they can literally put their best foot forward. You don't get any of that. Well, we did an offline test and this vendor is like 13% better, they say, or this other vendor is like, will perform 32% better, so they say. And then you do 12 to 18 months of integration, you find out like,
Yeah. You know what sucks is, like, I've done a POC recently, and like we had to do a full integration just to do the POC. And
yeah,
like if you do a POC like that and it doesn't work out, like, you've just wasted a ton of development resources, and it's going to be really hard for you to get those resources again if you want to try it again. So it'd be really nice if we could that A/B testing stuff. Can you run things in parallel too? Like,
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah. Like at some of the merchants I've been at, it's like you had to know like which vendor was better before you POC'd it, which like defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and that's why you like give them like a year's worth of data, and you're like, just run this against your pre-planned black box machine learning. Tell me, and it doesn't have any regard for like any sort of internal business logic or anything. It's just
Right.
raw data, and they have no session information, because they didn't have the JavaScript loaded. Then you're just literally giving them like PII and asking them to do some sort of data test before you even just say, okay, now you performed well enough there, just using your network of already known information. Now let's throw you in over here and do a full POC. And by the way, we hope it works, because if it doesn't, we just wasted a year.
Yeah.
And
And
now
all
my
of this
boss is going to yell at
cost.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all this engineering cost, right? And the opportunity cost of what they could be doing, that would be better.
Yeah. And that's why I think I mean, I had been hearing the buzzword, like I said, for so long, and it's super interesting to see to see it in action, and then to now have a better understanding personally. I like to learn all the new things that are happening in our industry, and I think this is one that's been really interesting to me after I figured out how you guys did it.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit different. Like I don't think that your sentiments are unique. I think a lot of our industry is just kind of sick and tired of those buzzwords for sure.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, especially like the new VCs that just come in from the outside. And like one thing like that was comforting for me is, like, I know you guys, and I like fraud tools that are built by fraud people that I know. I don't like fraud tools that come from the outside edge, that have nobody in our industry that I've never known, and are trying to solve for a problem they have no idea what the rest of us face. And the fact that you guys have actually been in the industry was very comforting to me.
Yeah, we fought the same like fights, have the same scars, right?
Exactly. And like, you know what? I like to be in battle with my brothers. So there we go. Um, are you guys building any other products too? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, you could, that's powerful, like what you could do with this.
yeah, so I think like we think of our platform in three parts. So one is just like the platform itself. So some of the things you've seen, are because that part of the platform is largely done, right? The capabilities of extracting data, workflowing it out, like having an integration station that can call out to all these third parties, and then pulling all of that data together in a rich UI. The next thing we're doing is to like kind of hand the keys over to leaders like you to have a rich UI, for you to be able to drag and drop, different connections to change workflows, on the fly. So today, Anthony on our team, like leads like the function to do all of that work for our customers, because that UX is like, about to drop. So we want to give like leaders like you the ability to self-serve if you want to, and
Oh, okay,
always be
so
there to
right
support.
now, like I still have to tell you, hey, turn this one on, turn this one on. But eventually, it's going to be completely on my thing. I could just grab it and go if, technically if I wanted to. You guys should totally make it. So, do you like you have your own licenses with these providers, and somebody can just click it without having their own license, but like you just they pay you like a plus markup, a lot like we do with like
Yeah.
payment processing. Just thought in my head,
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have plenty of monetization people over there helping you with that, but that'd be cool if I didn't have to like enter into an agreement necessarily with one of the providers myself directly, and I could just click it on with you guys on my own, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets us to the community piece, which is that third pillar that we think about. So it's like our infrastructure for all of our customers are single tenant. So we like don't extract any data. So it's like unpopular for a fraud company. Or like this is why we're not a fraud company. We don't extract any of that data from your customers to try to use as our data. Like we're almost like AWS and GCP, where it's just whatever you put in is yours. If you want to spin down the environment, you can do so. But there's a community
Hmm.
piece that we can build on top of that, and part of that is the access to all of the different tools, and connecting to those tools without having to go through contracting on your own. The
Got
second
it.
part is that, like, the community of resources that you've built up, like in the fraud industry, right? Nobody really goes it alone. And like there are run books, right? It's like, how would you attack this fraud ring out of like Southeast Asia? Or like here's a run book for how we like detected it, right? It's bypassing certain loading of solutions we have today, to like we're instituting these checks. Like we can have shared run books that you could be like, hey, just take a look at this playbook and then execute it on spec. I'll take you 30 minutes and this should do the trick.
Really interesting. That's a good idea there too. Wow. This is pretty cool, man. Like I'm still blown away. I should have swung by for a demo at one. I think I was trying to swing by at the last MRC, but it was right in the transition here where we were looking at fraud tools and getting ready to do a couple of POCs. But like, well, Russia invaded, and that kind of put a wrench in the
Yeah.
spokes of all of those things. But the I should have just came and swung by and got a demo. But we have MRC coming up again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to kind of wind this one down a little bit, I think, and let's talk about some of the top trends that are happening in your world here. Let's hear it. Top three.
Top three. So it's like, there's never enough engineering support for fraud, trust, and safety and payments teams,
Yeah, well,
right?
they always forget about us.
Yeah, there's always other dev that needs to be done, right?
Always.
Uh,
And it's always more important. No matter what I put a dollar value around my project, I'm always seen as a loss, not like any sort of thing that's going to make money. So I always get thrown to the back burner myself.
Yeah, I hear you. The second thing that we see is just like, these are uncertain times for online businesses, right? We went through like a pop with online shopping with
Yep.
COVID. Right now, like, Russia's driving, downward trends like across industries, right?
Yeah, you tell me,
Uh,
man. That's my
right.
primary market.
Yeah. And, like it's forcing like companies to diversify into like different markets, right? So all of these things I think are ancillarily tied to fraud, right? So it's like, imagine if you wanted to launch in a new market, there's new regulatory requirements of what you can or can't sell. If you're launching new product lines, there's different risks associated with that, right? Like digital goods or subscription fees are abused in different ways than physical goods that are shipped. So like the more online customers or online businesses need to focus on that, plus the customer experience aspect, right? Like nobody wants to wait for anything. Nobody wants to wait for a login to happen. No one wants to wait like to create an account and have somebody approve it. So all
Oh,
that's
yeah.
just driving like, all of the like pressure from all sides for these businesses that we support.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So
What about number three, man? That was two, I think.
yeah, that was two. So the last one is like, we've been seeing such great collaboration across the industry, right? So like, one of the our biggest fears was that like solutions providers would see us as competitive to their offerings. And what we've seen, I think, to the benefit of merchants and
Yeah.
online businesses everywhere, is there's been such great partnership, right?
That's
Coming from
huge.
yeah.
That's huge. Like, and I will say, like the fraud industry overall, like it has the we're all at the same parties. So all competing solutions are always at the same parties, and then a lot of us always like kind of circulate around in the industry. So you never know where anybody's going to really wind up. So you never really want to burn a bridge in this small industry. So I will say that the collaboration piece, especially from the solution providers, tends to be a little higher in this industry than it probably does in like versus Apple versus Microsoft world,
Right.
but like here, we are all in it together. I think there's like a little bit of playing things close to the vest as far as like the technology goes, but getting access to the solution itself is something that's completely outside of it. And if you have a challenging thing, some of these solutions are harder to integrate than others are. And having this to where it be something that would just be almost painless and effortless would be a huge change in how all of us approach the whole thing. So this has been super interesting. I know this is a short episode. I've been getting feedback that my episodes need to be a little shorter, so I figured we just jump right in, get to the meat of this one, talk about it. So yeah, is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to talk about in here? Anything we didn't touch on? Like,
No, I think the collaboration, like to bring this full circle, is like why we all get into like fighting fraud, right? It's just like we're kind of united against like abuse and on our
yeah,
sites,
people
right?
just trying to game the systems and get something for nothing. We all got to work for it, even those guys. But I think that this is one of the truly interesting ideas that's been in our industry yet. And I think that making sure that if we could spread awareness about what it actually does is going to be super helpful, not only for you guys on the sales side, but for you guys, the rest of like my listeners here, as they go through tackling these problems. I was saying the other day on another one of these that like a lot of us are in these long-term contracts, for years and years and years with our providers, but using you guys, like the wheels are already turning in my head, like using you guys would be a cool way for me to like just test something along the side to make sure that like the solution that I have is still really the solution that I should be having. And I think that like just being able to check that without having to do anything is pretty damn cool. So yeah, like kudos to you guys for building this, and thank you for taking the time even before this to explain to me what it actually is and how it actually works, so that I can get all these little preconceived notions out of my head about like just it being another buzzword, and showing me the actual technology and how it actually works. And I really like any of my listeners that are wanting to see this on their own website, like I really encourage you guys to reach out to Spec and like see a demo for yourself. Like it'll blow your mind, like that emoji.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on and giving me your time, and we'll see you out there in the fraud fighting world.